It's been a remarkable show of how the democratic process works or maybe doesn't work. And I think we've seen the president, as Batya was saying, taking credit for a victory that is not yet his and talking about going to the Supreme Court. And we have a president, I believe, the first time in American history, who is challenging some of the fundamental pillars of the American democratic system. And in effect, he's prepared his voters for the last couple of months for a tight election and for a judicial process afterwards. That in itself is fine, but when you have an atmosphere in which people are boarding up storefronts around the country, that's not a good situation.
Yeah, it certainly is really, really worrying. Let's now shift our focus to this region. Obviously, this election is going to have wide-ranging repercussions throughout the world. But what about here in Israel?
Well, there are a whole number of major issues that will be affected by this, whichever president is or candidate is elected. But I think there are two overwhelming ones. The first is the Iranian nuclear issue. Now, here we have both of the candidates saying that they would like to reach a new deal with the Iranians, a new and better one. Mr. Biden speaks of going back to the old deal as a stepping stone towards achieving the new one. And I think viewers have to ask themselves which candidate they believe is best suited to hold that negotiating process with the Iranians. The president in recent months has put himself, I think, in the unhelpful position of appearing to be almost desperate for a deal with the Iranians. And when that's how your negotiating partner views you, that's not a good place to be. The situation we're in now is that the Iranians are considerably closer to a nuclear capability than they were when Mr. Trump came into office. Now, he talks a very tough game. In reality, his policies on Iran have failed, I would say, almost completely, and I can elaborate if you want afterwards. The other major issue is the peace process with the Palestinians. Well, here, the president does have a very good record in terms of the UAE, Bahrain, but in terms of the Palestinians, nothing. And the question is whether we want a president that we have just a good atmosphere with, which we do with Mr. Trump, or whether we want a president who will help us reach a final peace agreement with the Palestinians.
So I just want to come back briefly to Iran. Tell me, what do you think, we've really seen this maximum pressure campaign with Trump on Iran. As you mentioned, it's not really coming to fruition, them being closer, as you said, to developing nuclear weapons. How do you see this looking if Biden is at the helm?
Well, whoever's elected is going to have to address this issue in the near future, because the Iranians, I said, are now, they're 4 months away from having enough fissile material for 2 bombs. And the American attempt to renew the UN ban on the sales of conventional weapons to Iran failed. Iranian regional expansionism is increasing. In every area, the policy has failed. The maximum pressure policy was designed, hasn't achieved the change in Iranian policy. It caused them pain, but that wasn't the objective. So I think what will happen if Mr. Biden comes in is we'll see a change, at least having a coherent strategy, which the president didn't have. I mean, he was right about putting pressure on the Iranians. That was good. But just withdrawing from the deal, just sanctions, that's not a strategy. We need a coherent one. And again, I think Mr. Biden is just intellectually better suited for doing that.